do you agree that most places companies are going to interview or look for candidates other than
Hmm.
online, right? That you are going to see predominantly white people apply if that source of candidates is predominantly white. That's just the way
Okay.
it goes. The numbers are the numbers. The math is the math. And if you go now, and particularly if you haven't done it in the past, if you're like, damn, why don't we interview at HBCUs? You go to HR. Hey, HR, why have we never interviewed at HBCUs? Why? Well,
Well,
I don't know.
okay.
I haven't gone to those schools.
Yeah.
Okay, so now CEO makes the decision. We are going to go to more HBCUs. That is going to increase the number of Black, maybe Hispanic applicants. We're going to go to more community colleges. That's going to increase the number of
Yeah.
Black.
So this is all independent of race. This is not, again, this is not what DEI
Yes, it
advocates.
is. This is exactly what DEI
Okay.
is. Just because you don't
Okay.
like it, doesn't
Okay.
mean it's not right, Rob. It's exactly what it is. And so
Okay.
what happens is when you expand your net, so you include people who don't look like you, right?
That's great. That's
That's
great.
great.
But,
As long
but
as
that's
you
not what
hire
people are
the
talking
most,
about.
as long as you hire the most qualified person. Now, let me tell you something else. Doing that is hard. It's not easy for companies to do that.
Casting a wider net is perfectly reasonable.
Right,
Okay.
but it's hard to do because companies just
Yeah.
aren't built that way. And so when they set goals, when American Airlines, United, Starbucks, all the companies you mentioned set goals, that's
Yeah.
what they're referring to. They're saying we're going to cast a wider net by going to places we haven't been before that have a greater population of demographics that we really don't have here. That doesn't mean we're going to hire them if they're not qualified.
First of all, these companies have not made that clear at all. And just to
That's a
just to be
different issue. But if
yes.
you listen to
And
the quarterly
okay,
earnings conference calls, they're a lot clearer on these things.
there's some confusion about terms here, and you already know this, and this does not need to be repeated. But just in case people aren't aware, companies like Starbucks, they had their quota pledge to achieve 30% BIPOC representation and 40% in retail roles by 2025. Pfizer wanted to reach 32% minority
Great,
representation at VP level and above by
great.
2025. They walked this back eventually.
But
Meta
why did
also
you have
had
a
these.
problem with that? Why did you have a problem?
Nike wanted a quota pledge to ensure
But Rob,
30%
why
of
did
their
you have a
U.S.
problem?
workforce
Why
was
did you
Black
have a
or Latinx by 2025. So,
Rob?
that's different from what
Why
you
do
are
you have
saying,
a problem with that? If that's a
because
goal, not a quota, that's a goal.
that's a goal. Because and this goes to the deeper problem. I still, what you're talking about, first of all, about expanding the net of people to select for your company, that's a noble goal. And if you're not already doing
Right.
that, that's a big issue.
That's what
If
I've
you're all
always argued. That's always been
if
my definition of DEI. Always.
but that's not what DEI people are saying. Okay,
No, no,
and you'll disagree with them. So then this is where we need different terms.
but
Maybe you need to
Rob,
stop using the word DEI, because when
no,
people say
companies aren't
DEI, they're
dumb.
referring to racial and gender and sexual orientation specific goals, and in some cases quotas.
Okay, if it's a quota, they can just say quota, even though they know it's illegal, right? But if it's goals, right, you would see progressions in their EEOC reports, right?
Uh-huh.
If they were able, if what you were saying is true, and they're not hiring specifically based off of merit, but the tie goes to the BIPOC, right, the person of color, or by whatever it may be, right? You would see that in their numbers. You
Uh-huh.
would see that in general employment, and
Right.
you just don't. You
Okay.
just don't. We're not seeing these reports, and we didn't in the past, where all of a sudden these companies, the unemployment rate for people of color drops because everybody's hiring for the reasons you've said, right? You're just not seeing it. If that were the case and they were getting an advantage because they're only 13% of the population, you probably should see an unemployment rate less within white collar jobs than you saw for white Americans, right? If it was so prevalent. Don't you agree? Because there would be a numerical impact on the final numbers.
So we're getting into another
No,
adjacent
but
issue,
no,
which is about
no.
the
You want to have a
outcomes.
conversation?
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
you
yeah. No.
agree that you would see an impact on the numbers if
So
if people of color were advantaged? You would see that because when it's the law of small numbers, when they're only 13% of the population, and you have all these huge companies that you say are giving them advantages, you would see the unemployment rate for white collar jobs and jobs that are relevant there decline. And it should be less than white Americans. Shouldn't it be? Isn't that math?
Yeah. Okay. So we can talk about this particular issue, and then we can circle back to when you say DEI, that's not what DEI advocates are talking about. So maybe you need to adopt better terminology.
No, I'm just telling you what business people do. I tell you what business people do, because you're talking about businesses. You're talking about businesses and what they're doing. And then you said they set goals because they can't set quotas. You think maybe they were quotas. So you said this is what these companies, and you named the company. So we're in the business realm, not the university realm. We're in the business realm. And if they do the things that you said that they do, not what I said that they should do, but they're actually hiring people who aren't, and they're making hirings not based off of merit, right? Then we should see a reflection of that in the numbers, so that white collar jobs for people of color should decline at a greater rate than, or should even be lower, because it's the law of small numbers, than white Americans, right?
Well, if the companies actually ended up doing what they said they would, you would have more minority representation.
Okay, so what you're saying now is they didn't do it.
Well, okay, so we can get to that. But so some companies walked it back. Some companies did do it. Other companies didn't do it. So a lot has happened.
Which companies did it that you saw the data that confirmed that they did it?
Pardon?
Which companies? You just said some of them did it. Which companies do you believe did it? And you have data that reflects the fact that they did it.
So I read this last night, and I'm pretty sure you tweeted about this at some point too, by the way. And we can pull it up. But an article in Bloomberg, if that's any authority.
Oh no, the one that says 94% of the incremental hires, right? That one.
Yeah, went to people of color. The year after BLM protests, S&P 100 added more than 300,000. Hold on. Hold on. They added more than 300,000 jobs. 94% went to people of color. Is that not a reflection of?
No, because they used the data incorrectly. So go back and look at the responses to that, Bloomberg, and I think they may even retracted it. Go back and look at the responses to that. It's been multiple years ago. That was what, 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
The article was 2 years ago.
Okay, 2 years, whatever it is. It was several years ago. And so because what it said was the incremental hiring in those companies, when you look at the total numbers, and again, I'm trying to do this from memory, it didn't include retirees. It didn't include people who were fired. It didn't include rollbacks in employment. So there were a lot of people who questioned that article, and there certainly wasn't anything out there to confirm it. Now, right?
Okay.
So there should be other numbers. My point is, there are numbers that are published by all these companies that you mentioned. A lot of that is the EEOC data, and I don't know if all of them are still publishing because all the PR risk. But like you could even look at Tesla. Tesla was a majority minority company in 21 and 22. I think was the last time that, and even then, when you looked at the numbers, it wasn't staggering over hiring of minorities or Asians or whatever it may be, right? They just have, the nature of their workforce is they were majority minority, and that's just the way it is. Other companies are going to be the opposite, but when you look at the numbers, they don't confirm what you're saying.